The moment I slammed the resignation letter on Jameson's mahogany desk. His shocked blue eyes locked onto mine, and the air in the penthouse office turned ice cold. After 7 years of taking bullets and living in his shadow as his personal bodyguard, standing up to the powerful Heir that day wasn't just quitting my job. It was the moment I finally let the secret love I'd buried for him tear through every professional wall I'd built. Rain hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, turning the city lights into blurred streaks. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the guy who fixed everything for Jameson Harrington. I felt like Giovanni Rossi, the man who'd fallen for the one person he was paid to protect. Jameson stood slowly, his tailored charcoal suit still flawless despite the late hour, the silver cufflinks his mother had given him catching the low lamp light. "Giovanni, what the hell is this?" His voice cracked just enough to remind me he was only 30. Not the untouchable tech empire prince the tabloids painted. I kept my shoulders squared, the same stance I'd held through 3 assassination attempts and countless boardroom threats. "It's my notice. Effective immediately. I can't do this anymore, Jameson. Not like this." He stepped around the desk, close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne. Sandalwood and something sharper, like the ocean air at the Connecticut estate where his family spent summers. 7 years of that scent had become part of my muscle memory, the way I knew exactly how his breathing changed when he was lying to his parents on the phone. "You're walking away because of one argument? After everything?" His laugh was bitter, the kind that hid panic. "We've had worse." But this wasn't about the argument at the charity gala last night, where he'd let his mother parade him beside some socialite heiress while I stood 3 feet away pretending my chest wasn't caving in. This was about the car ride home afterward, when the partition was up and he'd reached for my hand in the dark, whispering, "Stay with me tonight," the way he had only once before, after the shooting in Chicago. I pulled away then too, because bodyguards didn't cross that line. Not with heirs who were expected to marry, produce grandchildren, and keep the Harrington name shining for the Fortune 500 crowd. I picked up the letter and slid it closer to him. "It's not one argument. The 7 years of pretending I don't see you. 7 years of watching you smile for cameras while I check perimeters. I'm done watching you disappear into the version of yourself your family wants." My voice stayed steady even though my pulse hammered in my ears like it did before every threat assessment. Jameson's jaw tightened, the same expression he wore when closing million-dollar deals, but his eyes betrayed him wide, searching, afraid. He reached for the letter but didn't take it. Instead his fingers brushed mine, deliberate, and the touch sent the same electric jolt it always had since the day he hired me. Back then I was fresh out of the Marines, 25, still carrying shrapnel scars from Afghanistan and a duffel bag full of medals I never looked at. Jameson had been 23, freshly graduated from Wharton. Already running the digital security division, his father had handed him like a crown. The interview had been in this same office. He'd asked only one real question after reviewing my record. "Can you keep a secret, Mr. Rossi?" I'd answered yes without knowing the biggest secret would be my own heart. Now that same man stood inches from me, rain streaking the glass behind him like tears the city refused to shed. "You think I want any of this?" he asked, voice dropping to the raw tone he only used when we were alone. "The board meetings, the arranged dates, the endless pressure to be perfect? You're the only thing that's real, Giovanni. The only person who sees me." I stepped back before I could do something stupid like pull him into my arms right there where the security cameras could catch it. "Then stop hiding. But I can't be the reason you finally do it. Not when your father's already threatening to cut you off if you don't announce an engagement by Christmas." The words tasted like ash. I'd overheard the phone call last week. Old man Harrington's voice booming through the speakerphone while I waited outside the door like always. "You're not some artist, Jameson. You're the future of this company. Marry the right girl, give us heirs, and the world stays yours." Jameson's shoulders sagged, the first crack in the armor I'd guarded for years. "You heard that. It wasn't a question. I hear everything. That's my job." I turned toward the door, the resignation letter still on the desk between us like a live grenade. "Find someone else to stand in the shadows for you. I'm done being invisible." The elevator ride down 60 floors felt longer than any deployment. I kept my eyes on the mirrored walls, watching my own face. Dark hair cropped short, jaw set, the faint scar above my left eyebrow from the night I tackled Jameson out of the path of a sniper's bullet in Los Angeles. That night he'd gripped my shirt in the back of the armored SUV and whispered, "Thank you," like it meant more than survival. I told myself it was gratitude. I'd been telling myself that for 7 years. Outside, the rain soaked through my suit in seconds. I didn't call a cab. I just walked, boots splashing through puddles on Fifth Avenue, letting the cold water shock me back to reality. Giovanni Rossi didn't get happy endings with billionaire heirs. He got pensions and memories he'd bury in some quiet apartment in Queens. I was 3 blocks away when my phone buzzed. Jameson's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring out. Then it buzzed again. And again. By the 4th call, I was standing under a scaffolding, water dripping from the brim of my suit jacket, staring at the message that followed. "Come back. Please. I can't do this without you." I closed my eyes and saw every moment I'd locked away. The way he'd fallen asleep against my shoulder on red-eye flights, the quiet nights at the estate when he'd play piano and I'd pretend to check the perimeter just to listen, the single time he'd kissed my temple after I'd taken a knife meant for him in a parking garage. All of it had been building to this night, and now I'd finally pulled the pin. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Before I could decide, headlights cut through the rain and a black SUV pulled up beside me. The back door opened. Jameson sat inside, raindrops clinging to his lashes, looking smaller than the man who commanded boardrooms. "Get in, Giovanni. We need to talk." I stood there for a long second, knowing that stepping into that car meant crossing the line I'd drawn in blood and duty. But the alternative, walking away forever, felt like dying while still breathing. I slid inside. The door closed with a soft click that sounded final. The driver raised the partition without being asked. Jameson turned to me, voice barely above the hum of the engine. "You're not just my bodyguard. You never were. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise." The SUV glided through the rain-slicked streets toward the Upper East Side, but the world outside the tinted windows might as well have been on another planet. Jameson's confession hung between us heavier than the storm. I kept my hands on my knees, knuckles white, trying to remember how to breathe like the trained professional I was supposed to be. "What exactly are you saying, Jameson?" My voice came out rougher than I intended, the Brooklyn accent I'd worked hard to soften slipping through. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the same posture he used when negotiating hostile takeovers. Only this time the stakes were us. "I'm saying I've been in love with you since the day you tackled that protester at the product launch in San Francisco. You took a punch meant for me and didn't even flinch. I've spent 7 years watching you put yourself between me and every threat, and all I could think was how I wanted to be the one protecting you for once." His laugh was shaky. "Pretty pathetic for a guy who's supposed to run a billion-dollar company, right?" I stared at the rain streaking the glass, memories flashing like lightning. San Francisco. 4 years ago, the protester had been shouting about data privacy, fist flying before security could react. I'd moved on instinct, taking the hit across my jaw so Jameson could reach the stage safely. Later, in the green room, he'd pressed an ice pack to my face himself, fingers lingering longer than necessary. I told myself it was adrenaline. I've been wrong. "You never said anything," I muttered. "All those nights at the estate when your parents were in Europe. All the times you asked me to stay for dinner and we talked until 3 in the morning about everything except what we were really feeling. Because I was terrified." Jameson's hand found mine on the seat between us, warm despite the chill. "My father built Harrington Tech from nothing. He expects me to marry someone like Caroline Whitmore, old money, perfect pedigree, someone who'll smile in photos and produce 2.5 heirs. Coming out would be like handing him the keys to the kingdom and watching him lock me out. But you," his thumb traced the scar on my knuckle from a different fight, years earlier. "You make me want to burn the whole thing down if it means I get to keep you." The car slowed in front of his building, the doorman already holding an umbrella. I pulled my hand away before the door opened. Old habits. Inside the private elevator that only went to the penthouse, Jameson didn't speak again until we stepped into the foyer with its marble floors and abstract art, worth more than my entire childhood neighborhood. He kicked off his shoes, a small rebellion against the formality his mother drilled into him, and turned to me. "Stay tonight. Not as my bodyguard. As Giovanni." I wanted to say yes more than I'd wanted anything since the day I'd enlisted at 18 to escape my father's expectations. Instead, I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city I'd sworn to keep him safe in. What happens when your mother finds out? Or the board? They'll spin it as a scandal that tanks the stock. You've seen what they did to that senator's son last year. Jameson came up behind me, close but not touching. I know the risks. I've run the numbers in my head 1,000 times. But numbers don't account for the way my chest feels empty every time you leave the room. Or how I can't sleep unless I know you're in the guest suite down the hall. He paused, voice dropping. I almost lost you in Chicago. That bullet missed your vest by 2 inches. I sat in the hospital waiting room pretending I was just the concerned employer while inside I was dying at the thought of a world without you in it. I turned then, facing the man I'd loved in silence for years. Rain still clung to his hair, making it curl at the temples the way it did when we'd snuck out to the estate pool at midnight once. You think I don't remember? I woke up with you holding my hand before the nurses came in. You looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. Then you left before anyone could ask questions. Because I was a coward. His eyes glistened. Not from tears exactly, but from the weight of every unsaid word. But I'm done being one. Tomorrow I'm calling my father. Telling him the engagement talks with Caroline are off. That there's someone else. My stomach dropped. Jameson, that's suicide for your position. The board will vote you out. Then let them. He reached up, fingers brushing my jaw the way I'd imagined 1,000 times during long nights on watch. I'd rather lose the company than lose you again. The kiss happened before either of us could overthink it. Soft at first, testing. Then deeper as 7 years of restraint snapped like a cable under too much tension. His hands gripped my suit jacket like I might vanish, and I pulled him closer, tasting rain and relief and the future I'd never let myself picture. When we broke apart, foreheads pressed together, I whispered the truth I'd carried since day one. I love you too. God help us both. We didn't sleep much that night. Instead we talked, really talked, for the first time without the invisible wall of my job between us. He told me about the pressure since he was 12, the therapy his parents forced him into after he'd been caught kissing a boy at boarding school. I told him about my own father, the Italian immigrant who'd disowned me when I came out at 17, the reason I joined the Marines to prove I was tough enough. By dawn the city was waking up below us, and for the first time I felt like maybe we could face it together. But reality crashed in with the sunrise. My phone lit up with a text from Marcus, my second-in-command on the security team. Boss, we've got a problem. Harrington Sr. is on his way up. Says it's urgent. Jameson read the message over my shoulder and swore softly. He never comes here unannounced. I was already reaching for the suit jacket I'd discarded hours earlier. Old instincts. I'll handle perimeter. No, Jameson caught my wrist. You're not staff anymore. You're with me. We face this together. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. And there stood Edward Harrington, silver-haired and stone-faced, flanked by 2 lawyers. His eyes flicked from me to his son, taking in the rumpled clothes, the empty wine glasses on the coffee table, the way Jameson's hand still rested on my arm. What is the meaning of this? Jameson lifted his chin, the same defiant angle I'd seen him use in negotiations. Father, there's something I need to tell you. Edward Harrington didn't raise his voice. He never did. That was what made him terrifying, the quiet precision of a man who could ruin lives with a single phone call. Jameson, I suggest Jurgistwaite's in the kitchen while we discuss family matters. His gaze slid to me like I was a piece of furniture that had suddenly spoken out of turn. I didn't move. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't waiting for orders. I'm not going anywhere. Jameson's grip tightened on my arm in silent thanks. Giovanni stays. This concerns him. The two lawyers shifted uncomfortably in their bespoke suits. Edward's mouth thinned into a line I recognized from every quarterly review when profits dipped. Very well. Then let's be clear. The board received an anonymous tip this morning. Photos. Security footage from the Chicago incident 2 years ago. You and this man in a rather compromising position in the hospital corridor. He produced a manila folder and dropped it on the marble island. Glossy prints spilled out. Grainy but unmistakable. Jameson's forehead pressed to mine, my hand on the back of his neck, the moment I'd woken up after surgery and he'd forgotten anyone might be watching. My stomach twisted. I'd always known the cameras were there. I just hoped no one would ever care enough to look. Jameson picked up one of the photos, finger steady even though I could see the pulse jumping in his throat. Who sent these? Does it matter? Edward stepped closer. What matters is damage control. You will announce your engagement to Caroline next week at the gala. You will issue a statement calling these images doctored or misinterpreted. And you, his eyes pinned me, will sign a non-disclosure agreement and leave this building within the hour. Generous severance will be wired to your account by noon. The words landed like the knife that had once grazed my ribs in that parking garage. I'd taken that blade without hesitation because Jameson's life was worth more than mine. Now the same man was offering to pay me to disappear. I laughed once, short and hollow. You think money fixes this? Edward didn't blink. Money fixes everything, Mr. Rossi. It bought your loyalty for 7 years. It will buy your silence now. Jameson stepped between us, voice low but vibrating with something I'd never heard. Real fury. Stop. This isn't about money. This is about me finally being honest. I'm gay, father. I have been my entire life. And I'm in love with Giovanni. I'm not marrying Caroline. I'm not lying anymore. The silence that followed was worse than any shouting. Edward's face didn't change, but his eyes went flat, the way they did before he fired executives. You're throwing away a legacy because of a fleeting infatuation with the help? He's not the help. Jameson's voice cracked. He's the only person who's ever seen me as more than the Harrington name. He's saved my life more times than I can count. And I almost lost him because I was too scared to stand up for what we have. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Mr. Harrington, the board is prepared to vote on your removal if this becomes public. The stock is already down 3 points on the rumor. I watched Jameson's shoulders rise and fall, the weight of an empire pressing down on the man I loved. 7 years of protecting him from bullets. And now the deadliest threat was standing in his own living room wearing a $3,000 suit. I spoke before I could stop myself. Then let them vote. But Jameson doesn't have to face it alone. Edward turned to me slowly. You have no idea what you're asking him to sacrifice. The houses, the cars, the influence. Everything he's known since birth. I know what it feels like to lose a family because of who you love, I said quietly. My father stopped speaking to me the day I came out. I survived. Jameson will too. With me. For the first time, Edward looked at me like I was a person instead of an employee. Something almost like respect flickered before the mask slid back. Sentimental. But sentiment doesn't pay dividends. He nodded to the lawyers. Draft the papers. If my son insists on this path, he does it without the Harrington name or resources. Jameson didn't hesitate. Fine. I'll start my own company. I've got ideas the board never let me pursue anyway. The lawyers left first. Edward lingered in the doorway, looking at his son the way a general might look at a soldier who'd just deserted. You'll regret this, Jameson. When the money runs out and the press turns on you, remember I gave you a choice. The elevator doors closed behind him. The penthouse felt suddenly huge and empty. Jameson sank onto the leather couch, head in his hands. I sat beside him, close enough that our knees touched, the first time in public view, even if it was just us. You didn't have to do that for me, I said. He lifted his head, eyes red but determined. I didn't do it for you. I did it for us. For the first time, I feel like I'm breathing real air. We spent the rest of the day in a strange limbo. I called Marcus and formally resigned, handing over the security protocols I'd built from scratch. Jameson started making calls. His personal attorney, a venture capital friend who'd always hated his father's old guard, even a real estate agent about a smaller place in Brooklyn. Each conversation stripped away another layer of the life he'd been born into. By evening, the rain had stopped. We stood on the terrace watching the city glitter below, my arm around his shoulders for the first time without looking over my shoulder. "What now?" I asked. "Now we figure out who we are without the armor." He turned into me, pressing his face to my neck. "I'm scared, Giovanni, but I've never been happier." I held him tighter, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. 7 years of protection had taught me one thing. The hardest fights weren't the ones with guns. They were the ones where you chose to stay even when everything told you to run. The next 3 weeks blurred into a storm of paperwork and whispers. Jameson's resignation from the board made the front page of every business section. Heir steps down amid rumors of personal scandal. They didn't have proof yet, but the vultures were circling. Reporters camped outside the building. My old security team, now under new management, kept them at bay, but Marcus texted me every morning with updates. "They're offering cash for any dirt on you too." I moved my few belongings into the penthouse officially. No more guest suite. The first night we cooked pasta together in the kitchen. Something simple, the way my nana used to make it back in Brooklyn before everything fell apart. Jameson burned the garlic and laughed until tears came, the sound freer than I'd ever heard. "I've never cooked for anyone," he admitted, scraping the ruined pan. "Never needed to." "You don't need to now," I told him, pulling him close. "But I like that you want to." The real test came on a Tuesday when Caroline Whitmore showed up unannounced. She was everything Edward had wanted, elegant, poised, with a smile that could freeze lava. She found us in the living room reviewing business plans for Jameson's new startup. Her eyes flicked between us, landing on my hand resting casually on Jameson's knee. "So it's true," she said, voice calm but brittle. "The golden boy traded the kingdom for the bodyguard." Jameson stood, polite even now. "Caroline, I'm sorry you had to find out like this. I never meant to hurt you." She laughed once, sharp. "Hurt me? Darling, my father's already lining up suitors. I'm fine. But you," she looked at me with something close to pity. "You have no idea what you've done to him." The Harrington name was his entire identity. Without it, what is he? I met her gaze steadily. "He's the man I fell in love with. That's enough." After she left, Jameson was quiet for a long time. I found him on the terrace later, staring at the skyline. "She's right, you know. I don't know who I am without the money and the name." I stepped beside him, shoulder to shoulder like we'd stood through 100 threats. "Then let's find out together. Start small. That coffee shop you always talked about opening. The one with the terrible Wi-Fi where you used to hide from your father." He smiled faintly. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything." The betrayal came 2 days later. My phone rang at 4 in the morning, Marcus, voice tight. "Someone leaked the hospital photos to TMZ. Full story. Names. Everything." I woke Jameson gently. We watched the article load together on his laptop. Heir's secret gay affair with longtime bodyguard. The photos were clearer than I remembered. Time-stamped. Undeniable. Comments poured in, some supportive, most vicious. Old military buddies I hadn't spoken to in years texted variations of, "Didn't know you swung that way." Jameson's mother called, voice trembling with rage and disappointment. "How could you do this to us?" Jameson ended the call without answering. Then he did something that surprised even me. He opened his own social media account, one he rarely used, and posted a simple statement with one of the leaked photos. "This is me. This is the man I love. I'm done hiding. Proud." The internet exploded. Stock in the family company dropped another 8%. Edward called immediately. "You've destroyed everything I built." "No, father," Jameson replied, voice steady. "I'm building something better." But the pressure cracked him in small ways. He stopped sleeping. He paced the living room at night running numbers for the new company that investors were suddenly hesitant to fund. One morning I found him in the bathroom staring at the mirror like he didn't recognize the man looking back. What if they're right? What if I'm nothing without the name? I wrapped my arms around him from behind, chin on his shoulder. Then we'll be nothing together. And that's still everything. The low point hit when a former colleague from my security days, someone I trusted, sold a story claiming I'd manipulated Jameson for money. The headline read, "Bodyguard's 7-year con." I stared at the article until the words blurred. Jameson found me on the couch, head in my hands. "They're trying to break us," he said quietly. "Yeah." I looked up. "But they don't know how strong we already are." That night we made a decision. We left the penthouse, packed 2 suitcases and drove north to a small cabin in the Catskills I'd rented under a fake name. No security detail. No staff. Just us, a wood-burning stove, and the silence of pine trees. For the first week, we barely spoke about the outside world. We hiked, cooked terrible meals, and talked about dreams we'd never shared before. Jameson admitted he'd always wanted to teach coding to kids from underprivileged neighborhoods. I told him about wanting to open a gym for veterans struggling with PTSD. Slowly, the weight lifted. One evening by the fire, Jameson took my hand. "Thank you for standing up that night. I was drowning and didn't even know it." I kissed his knuckles. We both were. The cabin became our sanctuary, but the world refused to stay outside. 2 weeks in, Jameson's phone, left on airplane mode most days, suddenly lit up with missed calls from his sister, Lila. She'd always been the quiet one in the family, the artist who escaped to Paris rather than fight for a seat at the table. Her voice on voicemail cracked with urgency. "Jamie, it's Dad. Heart attack. He's asking for you." Jameson's face went pale. We drove back to the city in silence, the rental car eating up miles while I watched him wrestle with 7 years of conditioning. At the hospital, Edward lay in a private suite surrounded by monitors and the same lawyers who'd delivered the ultimatum weeks earlier. Tubes snaked across his chest. He looked smaller, human in a way that caught me off guard. Lila met us in the hallway, hugging Jameson tight before turning to me with a small, genuine smile. "So you're the one who finally made my brother brave." Edward's eyes opened when we entered. He looked at Jameson first, then at me standing just behind him, solid, present, no longer hiding in the shadows. His voice was weak but clear. "You came." "I came," Jameson said simply. He sat on the edge of the bed. "But I'm not here to apologize." Edward coughed, the sound rattling. "Stubborn. Always were." His gaze shifted to me. "You kept him alive all those years. I suppose I owe you thanks for that, at least." I nodded once. "I didn't do it for you." A ghost of a smile touched Edward's lips. "No. You did it for him. That's more than I ever managed." He reached for Jameson's hand with surprising strength. "The company, it's yours if you want it back. No conditions. The board will fall in line once they see the stock rebound on the news of my situation." Jameson shook his head. "I don't want it back the old way. I want to change it. Bring in diversity programs, support LGBTQ+ initiatives, make it mean something beyond profit." Edward closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, something had shifted. "Then do it. Maybe you'll succeed where I failed." His voice grew fainter. "And keep this one close. He's good for you." The words hit me harder than any bullet. I stepped forward without thinking, placing my hand on Jameson's shoulder. For the first time, Edward didn't flinch at the contact. Edward passed quietly 2 days later. The funeral was private, family only, plus me standing beside Jameson at the graveside under a gray sky. No press, no cameras, just the wind moving through the trees at the family plot in Connecticut. Lila squeezed my arm afterward. "Welcome to the family, such as it is." Back in the city, Jameson threw himself into rebuilding. He restructured the company from the ground up, naming it Harrington Renewed and announcing public support for marriage equality in a press conference that made every major network. I stood off stage, not as bodyguard this time, but as his partner. When reporters shouted questions about our relationship, Jameson simply pulled me into frame beside him. Giovanni isn't a secret anymore. He's my future. The backlash came fast. Boycotts from conservative investors, death threats that made my old instincts flare. But the support poured in too. Veterans groups reached out. Young queer tech kids sent emails saying Jameson's story gave them hope. One night after a long day of meetings, we collapsed on the couch in our new Brooklyn brownstone. The one we'd bought together with money from Jameson's personal trust, not the company. He rested his head on my chest, fingers tracing the scar from Chicago. "I stood up because of you," he murmured. "But I stayed standing because of us." I kissed the top of his head. We stood up together. 6 months later, the brownstone felt like home in a way the penthouse never had. We'd painted the walls ourselves. Deep navy in the living room, warm terracotta in the kitchen. Jameson's startup ideas had taken root inside the restructured company, and my veterans gym was opening next month with seed funding from Lila's Art Foundation. Life wasn't perfect. Paparazzi still lingered sometimes, and Jameson's mother still sent stiff holiday cards with no mention of me. But every morning I woke up beside him without the weight of secrets pressing on my chest. And that was victory enough. We were on the rooftop terrace one crisp autumn evening, city lights spreading out like stars fallen to earth, when Jameson turned to me with that half-smile I'd fallen for years ago. "Remember the night I chased you into the rain? Hard to forget. You looked like a drowned prince." He laughed softly. "I was drowning. You pulled me out." His hand found mine, thumb brushing the simple titanium band we'd exchanged in a quiet ceremony at the cabin 2 months earlier. No press, just us, Lila, and Marcus as witnesses. "I used to think love was something I had to earn by being perfect. You taught me it's something I get to keep by being honest." I pulled him closer, the glow of string lights we'd hung ourselves casting a warm halo around us. "And you taught me that standing up doesn't mean standing alone." Below us, traffic hummed its endless song. Somewhere out there people were still fighting the same battles we'd fought. Hiding, fearing, hoping. But up here, with the man I'd guarded for 7 years now guarding my heart right back, the future felt wide open. Jameson rested his forehead against mine, breath mingling in the cool air. "Thank you for forcing me to change. Thank you for letting me," I whispered. The city kept spinning, but in that moment the world narrowed to just us. 2 men who'd found each other across duty and denial and finally chosen truth. True or false? Standing up for your truth always costs everything, but is still worth it when the person you love stands beside you.